Welcome back to Divine Guidance with Anika Apple. I am glad you are here today. I am here to share the divine guidance for the month of June 2026. For those of you that are new to me, I am Anika Apple. I am God's heart, a prophetic voice, trusted advisor, author of the book Healing is Required, and every month I bring to you the divine guidance that God has shared with me for the world. I definitely encourage you, for those of you who are new, to go back and listen to some of the previous episodes, as typically what God shares with me is not just relevant in the month that it's delivered, but I typically see about 12 to 18 months out. And so a lot of times the releases are for things that are being foreshadowed, and we find ourselves in those moments. So you'll find quite a bit of relevance to what we are experiencing now throughout the messages that I delivered at the end of 2024 and all throughout 2025. But welcome, and I want to get right into it. As always, I start with a few things consistently. One is that you should always take anything prophetic that someone shares with you back to God. There are a couple different reasons why you need to do that. First and foremost, you want to be absolutely clear that the source of what you are listening to is aligned divinely. So always checking in with God to ensure that what you are hearing is meant for you. Two, how does what you've heard apply to your life? And so you're taking that word back to God is to sit and have a really good understanding of if it applies to you, and if so, how? What should you be doing with that information? What are you called to? How does it connect to your purpose, to your assignment? That's a discipline that we should have at all times, that we're not just taking the things that we hear and navigating away with them as if we have a full understanding of what is there. You know, the word says that we prophesy in part, which would mean that anything that comes needs something else to be in completion. And however God intends to deliver the other pieces of that, that is going to come from God. So if we're sitting with God by connecting in with the divine, you get the fuller understanding of how to apply it in your life. And what is the word if it is not to be applied in how you live and who you are being? So today, before I begin, I also want to just share that we're in a really complex time. And as I think about spiritual hygiene, just in general, it's really important for us to be paying attention to what we consume. There's so much intention to distract us from what is really important. And I know for myself, as someone who is a follower of Christ, that as I read the word, I am finding that scriptures that I have read dozens upon dozens of times have such an incredibly different meaning today. I was reading something in Jonah yesterday, and I got to tell you, I never saw what I read from the perspective of what God showed me. And there's so much richness in what is available to us. And yet we spend a lot of time consuming what people have determined based on whatever the criteria the algorithm says is appropriate, that that's what we should be feeding on. So in this season, I just really want to encourage you to reflect on the ways that you protect what is in your space, who you're around, what you're watching, what you're absorbing, how you are caring for yourself spiritually, in addition to how you care for your physical, emotional, and mental body. So that said, I want to go ahead and jump into the prophetic message for this month. A few months back, I shared that we were coming up to a time of tribulation and triumph, that there would be significant challenges, and that we were going to really see this differentiation between people who are experiencing this amazing time of triumph in their life, while other people were going through some times of really significant challenge. And we have been there. We have been in that space. It is going to become even more prominent in this month. I know that when I come back in July, I will have a very different message and tone and energy to share with you because of what happens between July and the end of the year into the beginning of next year. So there will be a lot for us to talk about. But in this month, I get to bring the message to you that for those of you that have been waiting patiently, steadfast, seeking, cleaning up the things that you know you had not completed, working to be in alignment with God, this is a moment where triumph is really going to be visible in your life. And that should be so exciting for you. With the things that begin to come to fruition, I'm talking about old ideas that seemingly out of the blue get talked up. And just like that, you begin to have the resources that you need to birth them. And the season, you're like, how did I go from having such a good finite plan about this 3 or 4 years ago and then not doing anything with it? It was dormant. And then all of a sudden, someone says something, it triggers a thought. And then before you know it, this thing is actually coming to life. You're going to find a lot of that happening. You're going to witness it in your life, and you're going to see it in the people's lives around you who are aligned with this same time of triumph. You are also going to see what God is doing is literally like they're showing me right now that they're moving things out of one hand and into another. And this is going to be mind blowing. It's not simply like, here, I'm giving you this thing that I've been holding on to you. It is literally a divine extraction from one place and deposit into another. And as you can imagine, that will stir up some things, right? But it also has been the plan all along. Imagine that the places that this is being extracted from have just simply been the keepers of whatever it is that God had already ordained to be yours when you came into this moment. When you arrived ready, having done the things that God asked of you, done the things that you committed to, become the person who sees that they are actually ready to receive. It's almost like you can equate it to a person who turns 18 or 21, right? And then they're able to receive that inheritance. It's the same kind of mindset. You had to be in a certain place, accomplish a certain thing, have an understanding of some things, whatever the different criteria was that you aligned on with God. Having accomplished that, it now is time for the thing that has been safely held somewhere else to come into your hands. What you want to be aware of is the emotion and feeling that you have about the thing coming into your hands. God is saying to me right now, tell them not to have sorrow about the place where it's coming from, but to recognize that it was all in divine timing. It was all intended to be so. It's interesting because God is showing me right now this check. I received a check out of the blue earlier this week, and I was like, where did this come from? And I really, I was grateful, certainly, but rather than like just sitting in the gratitude of it, I was like, what is this? Where did it come from? How did this happen? Like trying to figure out all of the things as if to disprove to myself that this was something that was supposed to come into my hands in this particular moment. And so I get I get it now. I'm realizing it even as I'm sharing this message with you, as God was showing me the picture of the check, that this is the thing that we need to be aware of, is that the things that we have been asking for, that we have been in waiting for, that we've been praying for, that we have been reading about, that we've known are ours, that God told us about years ago, that were written down in our journals, that we were told the stories by our grandparents, like that as all these things are coming, it's not for us to be in dismay, it is for us to be in a place of gratitude. And I want to remind you that, the saying, to whom much is given, much is expected. We know that comes and shows up in so many different places and is written in so many different ways, but all aligning back to the same thing and to the same root. That it is really important for us to recognize that you have to become the person that you are evolving into today in order to be able to receive, caretake, nurture, invest in, and grow that which God is putting into your hands. So for some of you, you've had some really long seasons that have felt very hard and difficult, that have felt very challenging, that where you wanted to give up, where you wanted to just throw in the towel, where you saw absolutely no way out of it, and you're wondering, how can this windfall come now? Why couldn't these things have been spread out across all of this time? I just came off a call before, we were talking about, in my holding space session, we were talking about suffering. And it's so connected, because when we are in times where we're feeling deep suffering, it's like, well, if something could have resolved that, why wouldn't you do it that way? But what is present for you to understand and accept is that perhaps you didn't have the wisdom then that you have now of how to caretake what God is putting into your hands. And more importantly, if you're not aligned to do the good that is attached to the things that are coming into your hands, then what sense would it be to give it to you before you are ready to nurture it in the way that it needs to be? We are not recipients of things that are being shifted from one place to another just because. There is something that God has designed you to be able to do with whatever is coming into your hands. And this could be finances, it could be love relationships, it could be that you are creating things, it could be that you are caretaking a ministry and that you are set up to build it for a time. And then you are going to hand it off to someone who can take it the next part of the way. Whatever the things are that God is showing you, that God is speaking in your ear in this moment, you now remember what they are. And now God is saying to you, and I have prepared you for this. And in this season, I'm now ready to put it into your hands. You had to be ready to receive it, though. You had to be committed to do whatever's required to nurture it. And in so many cases, I know for myself, the dismay that we often have about ourselves, the desire to not stand out and be the recipient of God's favor, the moments where we think we need another degree, or we need more letters behind our names, or we need some other kind of accolades or something to prove that we are worthy, those things had to move from being prominent in our lives to being footnotes, to being distant memories. This is a time of deep transition where you're standing in the shoes of who you were intended to be. And it's time for you to recognize they're no longer too big. They're showing me an image of like a boy who's like trying on his father's shoes, and they look like clown shoes. They look so big. It's like, for a long time, I was trying on those shoes and they were always too big for me. I didn't think I'd ever get to a moment where my feet would actually fit in them. And God says, look again, your feet fit perfectly. They're showing me Cinderella's slipper, like it's a perfect fit. So perfect, like you won't ever want to take them off again, because this is really the truth of who you are. And I want to remind you that the sum total of your experiences have equipped you to be who you are called to be in this season, and that is not by accident. So allow yourself to take a deep breath and sit in being who you are right now, knowing that you're going to continue to evolve, that you're going to continue to grow, that you're going to continue to prepare yourself for more, because there is way more on the way. God didn't say this was 1W. God says this is a time of triumph. So there are going to be a series of things that you are overcoming. There's celebration after celebration. The wins are bigger and bigger. They're more pronounced. They have a bigger reach and impact. They're telling me to say Zoom. Like, there's some of you right now who it's like you're at the starting line, but you're not going to be inching along. You're like Zoom. You're taking off like a rocket. You're going to be just going, like blasting off into another level. And the triumph that comes with that, the other people who are uplifted by you taking off. You can't even conceive of the impact of what God has already done in your life. And then you're taken off to another level. This season is unlike anything you have ever been through in your life. And it happens in the backdrop of what looks like things falling apart in the world. So I want to honor in this moment for you that you may feel a significant amount of dissonance. How can I celebrate these wins when these things are happening? How can I be happy about this? How can I not take everything that God is putting into my hands and go distribute it in all of these places? And what God is saying simply is, let them show you what to do with what is coming into your hands, because what you have has the ability to deliver a greatest harvest if you will just prune it appropriately, if you will just nurture it appropriately, if you will just feed it appropriately, if you will just not stand in the way of the sun being able to give it what it needs to grow and flourish. Several years ago, I was just writing something in a journal, and God started to tell me to draw. And as the end of it, I could see this garden, and there was a bench off to the side. And I was like, what am I doing here? And God's like, what do you want to grow in your garden? And I start saying what I want to grow. And God's like, draw the plant. So I just start drawing plants. They probably didn't look like the plant of whatever it was. But God was showing me this garden, and it was flourishing. And what God said is, I just need you to sit over there. I will do the watering. I will do the nurturing. I will do everything that this thing needs to flourish. My ask of you is that you watch over it. And they're bringing this back to me in this moment, because this is what we're called to do in this season. To stand by, to watch what God is doing, and then move in alignment with what God asks us to do. What could it look like for you in this season to just simply be prepared for the harvest, instead of feeling like everything has to have the same experience of toiling and trying to figure it out and all of those things? Simply put, let God do what God came to do in your life, what God wants to create through you and with you for the world, and just do your piece. We create so much complexity because we are always trying to prove, to do more, to create more. We're trying to do all of these things that get in the way of God getting the glory, of the ease that God desires for us to be in, of the simplified way that God knows people understand who they are and the messages that they deliver through the lives of others. When you look at it, things look complicated because we overcomplicate them in our humanness, trying to understand what cannot be fully understood by the limited amount of information that we have. What if we stop doing that in this season? What if we let that go? We allow God to tell the story through us, through our lives, and to us. There's simplification here. And for you to focus on what it is that God has given you to nurture so that it can grow, because then you will be able to take a meaningful harvest to be able to share. You'll be able to take seeds that you can deposit in other places to help other people nurture. And you'll be able to teach what it is that you have learned through observing the way that God has nurtured what they gave to you, understanding how things need to be pruned and what they need in order to survive the winters, and what it looks like to be joyful in the time of harvest, and what it looks like to feel secure even when you cannot see where the next things are coming from. The other big theme that God gave me was spinach. And I have to be honest with you, I was like, what? I don't even remember spinach being referenced in the Bible. So I was like, where is this coming from? But spinach, you probably can already think of a couple things popping up in your mind, like like eat your spinach, Popeye, right? Like it was the thing that gave strength. Spinach is also this perpetual harvest vegetable, and it signifies abundance and resilience, its ability to continue to grow, even in tougher circumstances. And that's what this moment is. It represents renewal. And that's what we are experiencing. And then there's also this beautiful connection of what it means to know and trust that the earth will provide. As a part of the ecosystem that God created, we have everything we need. We may not have everything we want, but we do have what we need. And the spinach, the vegetables, the things that the earth provides for us are abundant if we will take care of it. So, and it's interesting because I have an indoor garden, right? And in that indoor garden, I have a couple spots that where spinach is growing, and they just keep growing and growing and growing. And as I was sitting with this piece about remembering that the earth will provide is remembering that even this season, for all of the things that we are experiencing, have experienced, and will experience, God has already provided. There is, always was, and always will be a plan from God. We just have to be willing. In some seasons of our life, we don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again, right? But this is a moment for us to recognize that the discipline of doing what God has shown us again and again is how we strengthen ourselves for what is to come. I hear you. And so know that even the things that feel repetitive in nature and sometimes feel really cumbersome are about building a muscle you will be grateful to have down the road. And for those of you in this moment who are like, is she telling me that I should have a garden? Yeah, I am. I am. I'm telling you that all of the ways in which you have things in your life that help you to know that you will have what you need are important for you to do. Said another way, read your word or whatever spiritual text it is that you believe in. Seek God, seek the divine. Make sure you have time for it. Have your prayer time. Take care of your body, your physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being. Plant some things. Experience what it's like to grow something and to see it harvest and to experience the pruning. This lesson about pruning has been stirring with me over the last several weeks as I've been pruning the things in and outside of my garden. I recognize that it's through the pruning that you give it the best opportunity to grow. And sometimes it feels hard to cut off the things that had, flowered before, right? But if you have too many things going in too many different directions, you're taking the same amount of nutrients that can make something grow and really flourish, and you're sending it to all the different parts, right? And then scripturally, of course, we know that God cuts off everything that does not bear fruit. And the pruning of the things that do bear fruit help to ensure that it continues to be able to deliver a beautiful and bountiful harvest. Our life is full of those things. It's a metaphor for the ways in which you move in the world. And one of the things that I want to share with you in this moment is the importance of seeing yourself as connected to others. We are often moving through the world focused on what is important to us and not looking at what is important to the whole. But I'm going to call you up in this moment and remind you that your assignment is not just about you. It's not just about your family. It's not just about your local community. It is global. There is not a single soul in the world that does not have an element of something global connected to their purpose, to their assignment. So you are intended to have an impact that is greater than yourself. How you live it out is between you and God. It was defined before you ever took your first breath. But you are here now, and it's time for you to step into it. It's time for you to see yourself as a conduit for change in the world, not just locally and in your immediate family. There's an impact to be made here, and you made a commitment before you came that you would be a part of the journey. So it's time for you to reflect back on what that commitment is. Perhaps that means that you are sitting with God. Maybe God is calling you into a time of fasting to explore what that is, to remember it. Maybe you need resources to help support you with reconnecting to the truth of what that is. But it is time for you to ensure that you understand your identity and you know your assignment. We cannot create the kind of change in the world that we desire. And in our hearts, we all desire change. We may not articulate it the same way, and we may not all want it to look the same, but we all know that change has to happen. And there is a clear plan from God's purview of what is to be so. Our job is to take ourselves out of our humanness and to seek God to have clarity in that which we cannot understand just simply by our own minds, because our minds are locked into the history of our experiences. Our experiences will give us more of the same of what we have today. It is by elevating ourselves, allowing ourselves to consider what's possible beyond what we have seen, what we've experienced or imagined, and tapping into the wisdom of God, the wisdom of the divine, to understand what can be so. That's the work that is ahead of us. And that should feel good, because that message means that there's still plenty of opportunity for us to turn the tides, to change the directions of where things have been. Before I close, I just want to remind you of something that I'm sure you know. Maybe sometimes we forget. We could all use the reminder. At the heart of things, we are all God's children. I remember a couple of years ago, I was getting on an airplane, and as I got onto the plane in order of where I was supposed to get on, I was sitting in the window seat, and the two other people in my row, it was a father and a daughter, they were already in their seats. And as I went to get into the row, I said, "Excuse me, I'm sitting in the window." The facial expressions, particularly on the father, were so unsettling. And I thought to myself, like, I said, "Excuse me, I'm just going to my seat," right? And it was very, very clear that for whatever reason, they didn't want me there. Maybe they were hoping to have the row to themselves. I know I'm certainly guilty of that sometimes. I'm, hoping nobody's sitting in the middle seat or what have you. But it was overtly clear that they did not want me there, specifically that he did not. I can even remember a moment where I was handing the my cup to the flight attendant, and it was I'm like, it's a cup. And I very clearly said this to God: of all the people, all the rows that you could have sat me in, why here? Because I've gotten in a jovial mood and in peace. And all of a sudden, simply all I did was say, "Pardon me, my seat's over there." And I'm meeting all of this attitude and resistance. And what God said to me in that moment is what I want to offer to you. They are all my children, all of them. And I was like, you might want to have a refund on the attitude for this one for this day. And God said to me, "What about the refund for you?" Because I didn't want to have patience with whatever they had going on. I had all of my assumptions and feeling uncomfortable with what I assume was the dynamic for them, my assumption. And more than anything, in the moment where I said, "Why would you sit me here?" I did not want to offer additional grace. I felt like in the beginning, I was like, okay, maybe, whatever, having a bad day or whatever. And I, blew it off. But the more and more I felt the discomfort, the more it began to impact me. And even though I may not have shown anything outwardly and I wasn't disrespectful or anything like that, it didn't take me out of the seen part of my character, but I definitely was wrestling inside with like, what is the problem here? I don't mean to say to you that we can never have a moment of being in our humanness where we're frustrated or disappointed in the way that someone behaves or what have you. But sometimes we take that to another level of forgetting that we all actually do belong to God. The opinions and feelings that you may have about other people who have differences of opinions, who are different religions, who have different political beliefs, who live in different places, who different socioeconomic statuses, all of these things have become ways for us to divide ourselves, to separate ourselves one from another, yet we are all connected. We are all same. We are all God's children. There's an intention of why God is flowing this particular thing back through me in this moment. Because the question you get to ask yourself is, when will you remember that they all belong to God? And if they all belong to God, it means we are all connected. We're all brothers and sisters. We are all a part of the same. It was in God's design that there became different tribes. It was in man's design that we created this hierarchical structure, that we created this separation of things. Because if you remember, in the beginning of the creation of the lineages, it all came from one starting point. And we don't even need to go to how they became, right? Because clearly there was a lot of connectivity inside those lineages in order to procreate and have what became the tribes. My point to you is we have the same origin. We've all come from the same place, yet that is the thing that should have bound us together, that we all belong to God, and yet we operate in a way as if. And the levels of separation have become so deeply entrenched in the human experience. And what you cannot see or perhaps are not present to is that the more that we allow that separation to be so, the more that we are destroying humanity and everything in the beautiful creation that we call Earth. And it does not have to be that way. You can simply start with the remembering that it's all God's. And no matter how much you may not like a person's belief, their background, the things that you assume about them, their religion, opinions, their nationality, their gender, their personal preferences, they still belong to God. And as someone who has sat with God for so many deeply philosophical questions, deeply controversial questions, I can tell you that God's response is unwavering. They all belong to me. So rather than tick away the precious time of your life, trying to put people in boxes and categories to decide how you are going to interact with them, how you feel about them, what you think they deserve in their experiences, I will tell you, there's only one way to operate that is in alignment with the heart of God, and that is to lead from a place of love, remembering that despite whatever behavior you might experience from someone else, that is their humanness, not the intention of God's creation within them that you're experiencing. We all belong to God. We are all God's creation. And there is more for you to explore in what makes you frustrated, what creates dissension, what makes you angry, what makes you want to place people in boxes and categories. There's more for you to explore in that about your own heart than there is even in the person that is before you when you're having that consideration. Do that work within yourself, and you will be on the path to creating the kind of change and transformation that we need in this world. And I'm just pausing to look up, like, is there more? And God's like, and that is all. So that is it for this month's divine guidance for June. As I shared earlier, July will be a bit different because there's quite a bit to prepare us for between now and the end of the year. I want to encourage you, for those of you who believe in the power of prayer, to continue to pray for the world, certainly, especially around the leaders and leadership. And be really clear about what you are praying. The covering for people in leadership is important, but also what we desire to see happening in those places. For example, one of the things that I am always thoughtful about is that God's chosen people are moving into position with a heart for God, with clarity around their assignment, with an understanding of their identity and an understanding of the impact that they want to make. Have specificity about what it is that you're doing as you're covering them. And I just ask that always that you keep healing for individuals and for us as a collective at the center of what you lift up in prayer. Thank you for tuning in this month to our divine guidance. Couple of quick announcements. I just want to share that the Healing is Required podcast is on its way. So make sure that you are keeping a lookout for the launch of that next week. As always, I'd love to hear the impact, the things that resonated, things that came up in today's divine guidance episode that connected with what God has shared with you. So make sure you share that in the comments. And if you'd like to, share your feedback or have any, information you would like to share about our divine guidance podcast, you can send that through connect@anikaapple.com. Lastly, I have some really exciting programs that are launching in the month of June and the month of July. And so if you have not already followed me on social media, you can find all of those handles in the show notes. So please make sure that you are connecting with me there and on my website at anikaapple.com so that you can stay up to speed with all of the new and exciting offerings that are on their way. I wish you, as always, peace and blessings, and I will see you next month on the Divine Guidance episode. Peace and blessings.